السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله فإن الله تعالى مع المتقين. وبعد, I would like to take the following minutes to remind myself and others about some of the heroes that have emerged from the situation that is taking place in Palestine, in Palestine. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout history gives us role models and heroes that we can follow. And He gives us individuals that remind us of what Iman looks like. And Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he said, if I am not mistaken, if you are to take someone as a role model, take those who have passed away. Why? Because you do not need to fear for them fitna. I.e., when you take someone that is alive as your role model, if they go astray, there is a risk that you will go astray with them. But if you take someone who lived upon Islam and died upon Islam as a role model, you have a blueprint to follow until the moment that you leave this life. And as we speak, we have individuals, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is selecting them and taking them to be with Him amongst the shuhada bi'idhnillah, amongst the martyrs. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ وَلِيَعْلَمَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَيَتَّخِذَ مِنْكُمْ شُهَدَاءَ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He interchanges the days of power and struggle, so that the struggle for power shows the believers from the non-believers, the hypocrites from the truthful, and He selects from you, i.e. us, bi'idhnillah, shuhada, martyrs. And so I would like to speak about three categories of individuals. The first, and these are heroes, have no doubt about it. The first, the journalists. The journalists that are on the ground and they are recording the catastrophes and the massacres and the crimes that are taking place in Gaza. They are recording those events whilst they themselves are being bombarded along with the people. I read a statement recently that the amount of bombing that has taken place in Gaza over the last few weeks has now surpassed the weight of the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. And yet these people will not give up, and they continue to resist the occupation and the transgressions against them. And they do so with the word of Iman and the smile of Ihsan. And an individual that is a role model in particular, for me, a journalist by the name of Wa'il al-Dahduh. Who is he? He is an individual who has been recording the events from the beginning, and he has been speaking on the Arabic channels, and he received the news 2 days ago that his wife, his daughter, and his grandson were killed in a bomb attack on his home. 24 hours later, he's back on the job. Why? Because he said, we will not allow these transgressors to boast about us. We will not show them the pain. And we take it in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A role model. And there are many journalists like him. There are journalists that have lost their lives whilst recording. There are journalists whose families have been targeting whilst recording, whilst letting us know what's happening. And there are journalists that see that taking place and they continue. Another category of heroes, the doctors and the medical staff. And you can see a number of videos. And I tried to find a name. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a name. But I'm sure there are names out there. You can find a number of videos where you see surgeons, doctors that are treating people, and their family members come into the hospital and they witness their dead family members in front of them. They're treating people. Nearly 24 hours they are treating, and they are trying to save lives. And in the midst of that, their dead children come in. Their dead family members come in. Or they receive a phone call and they're told that your family members have been killed. And make no mistake, many of these deaths are targeted deaths. They are targeted deaths. Why? Because the occupation wants to try to drive the Palestinian people out of Palestine. This is a tactic that they're trying to use. And so they are targeting individuals who are making a major difference on the ground. The third category of people, the general public. The general public. A video that was recently circulated. A sister coming out of a building that has been bombed, rubble. She's emerging from the rubble. People are bringing her out, extracting her from beneath the rubble. And what is her main concern? She's clearly injured, she has blood on her body. What's her main concern? Making sure that her hijab is on. Making sure that her hair is covered. Iman. Iman. They've just been bombed. And she nearly lost her life. And perhaps she has family members who have just passed away. But her main concern is what? The application of Islam in her own life. These are heroes and role models for us. And now let's take a look at ourselves. And forgive me because this may be harsh. There are those amongst us who make excuses about praying. Those amongst us who make excuses about praying. Reality is it's laziness. And it's a lack of application of Islam. There are sisters amongst us who complain about wearing the hijab. It's too hard. I want to show some fringe. This sister, a role model. There are those amongst us that don't want to work and don't want to earn a halal income. We want the fast life, the fast money, and we make excuses. Look at the people of Gaza and the people of Palestine, working without compensation for their work. Why? Because they're doing it for the sake of the ummah, for the sake of the people. And do not look to those who are losing their lives in Gaza, in Palestine, and think that these people are being killed. No, they are being selected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's istifa' min Allah. And the manner in which Allah is selecting them is just a medium of that selection. Whether they are being shot down, whether they are being bombed, whether they starve to death. It's a medium of selection that Allah has ordained for them. Ultimately, it goes back to the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's a blessed qadr. وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتًا بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ يُرْزَقُونَ فَرِحِينَ بِمَا آتَاهُمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. Do not think that those who are killed in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are dead. No, they are alive. And they are receiving provision from their Lord. And they are pleased with what Allah has given them. And they give glad tidings to those that are going to come after them. That there is no fear and nothing for you to grieve. They are waiting for their family members. And they will intercede for their family members. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran refers to the shuhada as being ahya, alive. But at the same time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to who is being dead. Those who disbelieve. Amwatun ghayru ahya. They are dead in life. Amwatun ghayru ahya. Dead in life. Why? Because they're running after this dunya. They're chasing after that which has no tangible meaning or no tangible value. That which does not enter into the grave. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has selected the people of Gaza and the people of Palestine, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has honored them. And I will conclude with a video. A man who lost some of his children, and he raised one of them up and said, Ya Allah, this is a sacrifice for the defense of Al-Aqsa. That's Iman and Ihsan. They are giving their lives, giving their children's lives, giving everything that they have, giving up the comforts of this dunya, and they're doing so without questioning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, they're pleased with the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the question again comes back to us. What about us? What is our state? And as I have said before, don't cry for them, cry for ourselves. If we cry for ourselves, not for them. They are with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What about us? Are we with Allah? They are with Allah. Are we with Allah? أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله وحده وصلوات ربي وسلامه على أشرف الأنبياء ومن تبعه وبعد. If you are aware, there is a campaign against those who speak out for Palestine and speak out for the injustices that are taking place in Gaza and in Palestine. Individuals are being targeted in their workplaces. Imams are being targeted in masjid. Public speakers are being targeted in their public speech. And certain individuals or groups, etc., are trying to suggest that certain words are anti-Semitic or discriminatory and so on and so forth. But there is an important point that needs to be made. Words can be banned. Individuals can be banished and prevented from speaking. But the situation of Al-Quds, of Al-Aqsa, will remain in the hearts of the believers regardless what happens. And this cannot be prevented. And the Muslims will remain upon Islam no matter what happens to them. This cannot be prevented. What we should concern with ourselves with is whether or not we are going to be from those who are on the side of the truth or the side of falsehood. Whether or not we are going to be those considered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be Muslims and mu'mins, or we are going to be considered from the munafiqeen and those that sold their brothers and their sisters and those that sold Islam for a cheap price. That's our concern as individuals and as a collective. In situations and in times where it becomes difficult to hold on to the truth and to speak the truth, remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-haq. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our guardian. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-muqaddir. And no harm, nor no ease can be granted or given to a believer or a non-believer unless Allah has decreed it for them. And so we attach our hearts to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we concern ourselves with that which is pleasing or displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we don't concern ourselves with mankind. We concern ourselves with the Lord of mankind. And we look to the Quran as a reminder, as dhikr. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls it as dhikr. It is the reminder. Look to the nations that came before us. How many prideful and arrogant nations stood against the truth and challenged Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What was the result? And how many weak and impoverished peoples stood up for the truth, and what was the result? And the best of examples is, of course, the example of Musa alayhi salam and Banu Israel, the followers of Musa. Musa who stood up against the tyranny of Pharaoh, and he freed the children of Israel from the tyranny of Pharaoh. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the end granted them what? Victory. So we have to concern ourselves with that which is pleasing to Allah and that which is displeasing to Allah. Drown out the noise and focus on the Lord of mankind. And focus on the end result. And remind yourself about the promises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for both the believers and for those who disbelieve. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us steadfastness upon that which is pleasing to Him. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala aid our brothers and sisters in Palestine. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take into account the oppressors and the aggressors and those that transgress اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. وارض اللهم عن أبي بكر وعن عمر وعن عثمان وعن علي وعن سائر الصحابة أجمعين. اللهم تب علينا واعف عنا إنك مجيب الدعوات. اللهم ارحمنا ووفقنا لما يرضيك عنا يا مجيب الدعوات. اللهم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك. اللهم استخدمنا ولا تستبدلنا. اللهم استخدمنا ولا تستبدلنا. اللهم يا رب العالمين انصر إخواننا في فلسطين. اللهم عليك بالظالمين الغاصبين المعتدين. اللهم خذهم أخذ عزيز مقتدر وانتقم منهم فإنك أنت المنتقم. وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وأقم الصلاة.